What's up and welcome back to the Overwatch League YouTube channel. The league is starting up again, and you know what that means. It's time for the reinforced power rankings. We're back this year, and this year they're going to be mine. They're my power rankings. I'm back to my 2020 shenanigans, where I get to place teams wherever I want to, based on the eye test, based on my emotions, based on whether the coffee was hot or cold this morning. So you'll have to deal with that, which means more fun for me. I don't know if it's more fun for you guys. I can't speak for the viewers in that regard. I don't know if you guys enjoy this, but I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. And so I put together my power rankings going into week 1 of the Overwatch League. Now, that sounds great. I think we're all excited about that. But there are a few things that are a bit complicated about putting together power rankings for week 1. Number one, we haven't seen a lot of these teams play, and they've just changed up their rosters. So, I'm trying to assess teams here before I even seen them play in the first place. And number two, it's a new game that is 5 versus 5 instead of 6 versus 6. So it's gonna be great. Power rankings is back, baby. I'm so excited, and I hope you enjoy these power rankings as you go along with me. And give me some leeway here. I'm recording on the 26th of April, so about a week from publishing. So if there's any roster changes, there are some rumors about some teams like London Spitfire, Chengdu Hunters, etc. Just bear with me, okay? There might be some incorrections here, but for the most part, this is going to be my power rankings going into week 1, so I hope you enjoy them, and I'd love to hear any comments on them in the comment section down below if you have any feedback, any thoughts yourself, and we'll try to get through this into week 1. I'm so excited. So, without further ado, let's get into it. My week 1 power rankings going into the 2022 season of the Overwatch League. Here we go. So here it is, the 20 teams. I've ranked them all accordingly. We put the regions together because even though, we're not going to see a lot of league play between the two regions, there are going to be some tournaments this year where you'll be able to see some of the APAC teams, the Eastern region, go up against the Western region and the North American teams. So this is how they fare, they rank up against each other. So we're going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to give some comments on a couple of teams that I find stand out and that I find intriguing going into the season. So let's start out at the bottom. We sort of have 4 teams at the bottom, in my opinion anyway, that are sort of in their own kind of tier, and they're up-and-comers. They're trying to punch above their weight to put together some interesting rosters with the Vancouver Titans, the Los Angeles Valiant, the Guangzhou Charge, and the London Spitfire. Now, most people, they're very low on the London Spitfire, and I'll be the first one to admit I put London Spitfire at number 17th here because I do think that they have some potential with their roster. If I had to pick one of these 4 teams that stands out in my opinion, it's the London Spitfire, because I like their DPS trio that they have going on with Sparker and Shax. I think those 2 players primarily are really talented and have shown in the past that they can compete with some of the best players around the league at a pretty competent level, and I think they'll be able to ride that in a 5 versus 5 setting to get some wins. I like Admiral on the main support role. I think that he's shown promising contenders, and they could really use his leadership to try to put this mechanical skill into more of a team effort with nice strategies and team chemistry as well. Hadi, he had a difficult 2021 season on the tank role, but alongside Poco, maybe they could form some kind of tank synergy duo leadership kind of thing where they learn from each other. Maybe Hadi can learn some tips on wrecking ball and off-tank kind of mentality, whereas Poco himself can take a go at Winston and Reinhardt, and they can learn from each other. So that could be a pretty good partnership. After that, we have a separate tier that's really just like half the league, okay? No one knows what's going on in this tier. It could go any way whatsoever. And between this tier, honestly, it's between number 8, the Houston Outlaws, and number 16th, the New York Excelsior. So there's half the league for you that I've just put together in one tier, because honestly, it could go either way. You could convince me at the end of the season that New York Excelsior would be the number 8 team, because they have Yaki, they have Flora, etc. But at the same time, there are some pretty big holes in their roster, in my opinion, and it doesn't sound like it's going very well for them, so I'm a bit down on the New York Excelsior. But let's talk about number 15, the Toronto Defiant, because this is a very interesting roster in my opinion. So Toronto Defiant, they've refurbished pretty much the entire roster. They kept Hisu from last year, who is a fan favorite, and for good reason. Hisu is so much fun to watch on that Hangzhou. He racked up the highlights last year and was the one who carried them across the finishing line a lot of the time, alongside Aspire, who joined that roster as well. The support line is fantastic for the Toronto Defiant. I mean, you have Twilight alongside Chorong, who is the greatest rookie main support coming into the league in my opinion, and you've already got a really solid support line that you can rely on consistently in games. Hisu, as I said, he's still on the roster, but There are some questions about, his duos. Are they going to be a second kind of DPS player that steps up to the plate and can help him out in crucial situations to win some of these games? And then the tag line as well. Muse and Hotba, yeah, they've been around the league. Hotba, he's been on like 4 different teams at this point, or maybe it's 5. He's been around in the league, but nothing that really makes me super excited going into this season. So we'll see what happens to the Toronto Defiant. I put them at number 15th, but they have the ability to punch upwards. Number 13, we have the Florida Mayhem. I think this is a team that is really worth talking about because they have someone who's coming into the tank role. They have Hydron, who's a really fantastic DPS player coming into this year of the Overwatch League as well. And they've picked up Xe, who is going to be joining this roster a bit later in the season. But he'll be playing from Korea, get the scrim time in, and maybe even we'll see him play in some matches as well. The backline, there are some questions about. Sir Majed couldn't get his visa in time, so they picked up Karib to play alongside Anamo. Now, there's veteran experience for you. But is that ultimately going to lead to wins? That is a big question mark in my opinion. Of course, some of these rookies coming in, they're like sublime mechanical skill. The stuff they do in Ana with the biotic grenades, etc. Some of the Lucio wall riding stuff, it's crazy. And Anamo, he's known for being a bit more of a passive kind of main support. The coaching staff, they said when they signed Anamo, they wanted him to do what they kind of did with Jonak in 2018 with the New York Excelsior. Just pocket your flex support and rely on the flex support to carry some of that momentum for your backline. Well, we'll see what happens with this Florida Mayhem roster, but for now, I'm quite honestly very excited to see what they have in store for us because I genuinely think there is a lot of talent on this roster, and I have faith in their coaching staff as well, Gunba and McGravy, to take some of these players and really grow them this year into capable Overwatch League caliber players if they weren't already. So there's number 13, Florida Mayhem for you. Now, Paris, I'm just going to talk quickly about Paris. The number 12, higher than most people would expect. And I understand that. I think that some people are down on their tank line and damage line. They can't really hold their own in the league. But I genuinely do think that Khan is a fantastic flex support, and I think he'll have some impact on Senyata and Ana primarily this year. And I think that Naga catches a lot of flack, more than he deserves, to be honest. He's a reliable, very flexible, versatile kind of DPS player as well that can play everything from Pharah and maybe swap over to some of the hit scan heroes. And this leads to the Paris Eternal. They can play a lot of different strategies, a lot of different compositions, and I think that they'll very much benefit from that this season. In a season where you're playing a new game, there's new circumstances with 5 versus 5, being able to play a lot of different compositions, and keep in mind, a lot of these teams have changed up their roster. They're trying new rosters essentially with no previous experience, like the New York Excelsior, Florida Mayhem even. Like, how many of those players have played together before? Paris Eternal, for the most part, they've, of course, assigned Glister to their roster, but they've kept it relatively the same, and I think that's going to be a big boon for this Paris Eternal roster, and I think they'll be able to out-strategize a lot of these different teams in the region, while those other teams figure out, how their roster is supposed to function and what it's supposed to look like, what compositions are their best. Paris Eternal, they already know that, so I put them at number 12. Now, let's move it up a bit. Let's move it up to the Houston Outlaws at number 8. This is a team that I think is really knocking on the door of being a top-tier team, but I placed them at number 8 outside of the top 7. We'll see how things go for them. They don't have a main support player. There are some rumors that, either Lastro or Iris will have to step up to the plate. Maybe we'll see more of the Iris Batiste while Lastro flexes some of the other flex support heroes. Or they'll just have Lastro carry a lot of the load playing Lucio, Brigitte, etc. So I don't really know how that backline is going to function, but regardless, I think you're looking primarily at the damage line of the Houston Outlaws as one of the most exciting parts of that roster this year. Dante, Pelican, I mean, these are all-star kind of caliber damage players, and they picked up Merit as well from Contenders, who's one of my favorite rookies because I generally do think that Merit can contribute as a hit scan player in so many different ways. He's consistent, and he can rack up those highlights if asked from him as well for this Houston Outlaws roster. So Houston Outlaws, they're knocking on the door of that top tier kind of top 7 in my opinion. So let's move up to the top 7 then. There's going to be 5 teams here that I think are competing against each other. It's going to be Los Angeles Gladiators at number 3 through San Francisco Shock at number 7. Those are the kind of 5 teams that I think are battling for some of the top placements as well. San Francisco Shock at number 7. I mean, First of all of these 5 rosters, they're amazing, by the way. So I'm really looking forward to see all 5 of them. But San Francisco Shock at number 7, they could probably deserve to be higher in this regard. I have very high expectations for the San Francisco Shock. If you told me that Shock are going to be in the semifinals, in the playoffs towards the end of the season, I would totally believe you. I'm a huge Proper fan. The things I've seen Proper do in games are just like crazy, and I can't wait for you guys to see what Proper can do as well. That being said, they don't have a main support player. Violet is rumored to be picking up a lot of those duties as well, unless you expect Finn to take over some of the Brig, Lucio stuff. I honestly can't see that, given that last year even we saw Violet flex over to some of that main support stuff. So that seems to be the case, but we'll see how that plays out for the Shock team. Regardless, I think this is a team that has a lot of individual skill. I think they'll punch upwards. I don't expect them to stay at number 7 much longer. I think they'll move up into like the top 5, because they just have so many fantastic players on their team, whether it's Violet, of course, who has big playmaking abilities. Remember, he was an MVP candidate in 2020, for example, like top 3. Kilo, I think, is a fantastic addition who can play hit scan against some of the better... Siri, I'm doing a video here, okay? I know that you like the other teams, but Kilo is genuinely a really good hit scan player. So I think that Kilo is going to be very fun to watch and follow in the league because of his... he's a bit inconsistent, but generally, his peak is like insane. He can combat some of the best hit scan players in the league. So I think that's going to help alongside Proper. I would expect the San Francisco Shock to play a lot of Widowmaker kind of hit scan compositions to play around that. And when they do, I think they're going to be able to compete with some of the best teams in the league. Now, let's talk about the Los Angeles Gladiators at number 3. This is another roster that is refurbished a little bit. They picked up some new exciting talent, primarily in the damage department, where they picked up Parifan, of course, and Ans alongside Kevster to replace Birdring, who was a really good hit scan player for them last season. Now, there are some question marks around those 2 pickups. For example, Parifan, is he going to be able to live up to his reputation, like how good he was for Team Thailand in the World Cups, etc.? You know, he spent some time in some other games, and Ants as well. He took a bit of a break from the game and didn't have the best 2021 season for the San Francisco Shock after a striker temporarily retired. So, some question marks about the damage players for the Los Angeles Gladiators, but overall, this is a really stacked roster. I mean, starting at the support line, you have Funny, Astro, and Shu. That's like already a top 3 backline in the entire league, and that's really going to help you out. Shu, he could legitimately win MVP this year in 2022, so I'm really looking forward to see that backline play together. Kevster, all-star kind of damage caliber player who can play a lot of different heroes at a really high level and take it to some of these teams. We'll see how Reiner kind of fits into this team, how much playtime is Space going to get, but I'm really looking forward to see the Gladiators play. I think they're a well-rounded roster with very high peak potential and great coaching staff to go with it. So if any of these teams are going to challenge the number 2 teams, the top 2 teams, it's going to be the Los Angeles Gladiators, in my opinion. So let's get to it. The top 2 teams of the Week 1 power rankings is going to be the Dallas Fuel and the Shanghai Dragons. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody, because these were the 2 best teams last year as well. They went head-to-head in so many fun encounters, and yeah, Dallas Fuel, they didn't make the grand finals against the Shanghai Dragons. I get that, but still, like, they were so consistent throughout the entire regular season, the way they consistently made the stage finals as well, won a couple, so, or one rather. Dallas Fuel, really good team, and they've upgraded their roster this year. Chio is a fantastic main support pickup for this team, replacing Jexay, so they're improving in that aspect. And then as well, Gurio and Edison is going to play for this team, and I'm expecting, honestly, those guys to see some playtime as well, because you have 4 damage players who specialize kind of in their own craft at various different heroes, and I think they're all going to contribute to the Dallas Fuel and do really well for themselves. So I'm excited to see the Dallas Fuel. I think they're going to be the undisputed top dog of the North American Western region. So looking forward to see the Dallas Fuel and Shanghai Dragons at number 1. I mean, what do you say? 2 years running now, complete dominance. Of course, going into the 2021 season, there were some questions. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, they were playing like brawl compositions with Reinhardt and got full hell by Chengdu Hunters. So started off kind of rocky in 2021, but then they picked it up towards the Summer Showdown, and they just went on an absolute tear, apart from the Countdown Cup, where, you know, it seemed like they took some time off, but then they won the grand finals in a very convincing fashion. So Shanghai Dragons, undisputed number 1 going into this year. They've, you know, picked up Bebe. So there you go. Maybe we'll see who are you do some with some play time. These 2 teams are fantastic, and so they remain sort of in a separate tier at number 1 and number 2. I think it's going to be really fun to see them take on 5 versus 5 in Overwatch this season. So there you have it. My week 1 power rankings. Of course, we haven't seen the teams play yet, so they're all going to change around quite a bit throughout the first stage as we see some of these teams take on each other. I'm so excited for 5 versus 5. I really am. The game is amazing. The faster pace, missing 1 tank. You're going to see some of these damage players do some absolutely bonkers stuff. So some big surprises are coming up this season. I bet there will be tons of nice surprises, and I'm all here for it. So if you have any feedback on my week 1 power rankings, feel free to leave it in the comment section down below, and I'll happily take the criticism, because who knows, guys, we haven't seen these teams play, but I'm so excited to see some of these rosters go head to head against each other. Like the video, subscribe to the video, and I'll see you in a few weeks time for another episode of Reinforces Power Rankings. Stay tuned, everyone.